Good morning, everyone. Education plays an important role in helping us meet the challenges that we face as a province to match our growing place in the world. And that means exciting opportunities for kids. As Minister of Education, I believe that our children, their parents and families and employers are depending on a publicly funded K-to-career education system to facilitate the development of three very important ingredients for the successful future of our kids: knowledge, skills, and character. Knowledge, laying the foundational basics of reading, writing, math, and the sciences. Skill, helping our kids develop the competence and confidence they need to succeed in life and the workplace. And character, partnering with parents to pass on family values, beliefs, and culture from one generation to the next, facilitating the transformation of values into virtue. With the dedicated team of teachers and support staff that we have in this province, I believe that we are up to the challenge. Today, as Minister of Education, I want to ensure parents, regardless of what your family looks like, that we will support your role in the lives of your children with all the rights and responsibilities that come with parenting. As the family is undoubtedly and undeniably the primary and most essential thread in the social fabric of any country, jurisdiction, or community, and as the family is the first line of support and protection for children, parents have a fundamental right and responsibility to nurture and raise their children. We know that parental engagement and inclusion is a vital component for achieving positive outcomes and success in the lives of children, including in their academic lives. All people, Indigenous people, non-Indigenous people, new Canadians, all have a natural desire to pass on their own values, beliefs, and culture to their children. We have heard from parents on this. Therefore, I'm announcing the following changes. As of today, schools must seek parental consent when changing the preferred name and pronouns used by a student under the age of 16 in the school. Parents must be informed about the sexual health education curriculum and have the option to decline their children's participation. And boards of education must immediately pause involvement with any third-party organization, such as ARC Foundation and the SOGI 123 program, connected to sexual health education as the ministry undertakes review of educational resources to ensure alignment with curricular outcomes. Only teachers, not outside third parties, will be able to present sexual education materials in the classroom. And with that, I'd be happy to take your questions.
What prompted the decision to have the parents notified on the names? Well, why do that?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Adam. We certainly have heard from parents on this. Part of the changes today is to provide consistency across the school divisions. Some school divisions have already begun to implement administrative policies that would essentially allow for a student to not have their parents notified when they indicated that they wanted to change their name or gender at school. We certainly believe that parents are vital for the growth of their own children. We also have policies in place that require parental consent for any number of things. So to go on a field trip, to take part in extracurricular activities, to be dispensed medication, to have an intervention plan administered, developed for a student, parents have to consent for those things already. So we wanted to put in place a consistent policy across the province, as school divisions have slowly been looking at these types of policies, to say that we want parents to be involved. Parents want to be involved. More involvement, not less involvement. There will be provisions in place in the event that a child believes that they are at risk of harm in the event that their parents know. So there will be provisions in place, like there already are in other instances in schools, that will provide that support. My view is the default position can't be, how do we keep this from the kids' parents? The default position needs to be, how do we provide that student with the support so that they are comfortable with their parents knowing a decision that they want to make.
So if a child goes by different names and pronouns in the school but doesn't notify the teacher, would the teacher be required to notify the parents?
That's something that we're going to work through with school divisions as we implement this policy. Obviously, there are very complex issues that we're dealing with and lots of different scenarios. I think one of the challenges that these policies that this is trying to address are trying to help is that in the event that a child, say in that instance, let's say they socially change their name and gender, perhaps they don't formally notify the school, but everybody in that school knows. In the event that policies are developed by school divisions, which has already happened, that if the child doesn't want their parents to know, the challenge with that is that other people outside of the teacher know, or potentially know. And so that increases the likelihood that the parents are eventually going to find out. We still have fairly small community schools in this province. And so that potentially puts that teacher in a very difficult position who is trying to build a relationship with the parents as they are educating the child. It potentially puts that teacher in a very compromised position the way that the policies are being written by some school divisions now. So we just want to say that across the 27 school divisions, for those that have some of these policies already and those that have not developed these policies, we want to ensure that there's a consistent policy to say if a child does express an interest that they want to formally change their name and gender, that if they're under the age of 16, that their parents will provide consent, or there will be a plan to support that student so that they can get to a place where they can't tell their parents.
If the parent doesn't support it and doesn't supply consent, would the teacher be penalized or receive any trouble from the school division for supporting the student?
Well, at this point, we're not talking about penalizing teachers, but the direction will be that the teachers will not essentially acquiesce to the wishes of the child unless the parents consent if they're under the age of 16.
Does this policy is clearly aimed at targeting trans youth, but would cis youth also be affected, such as if a student went by Timmy instead of Tim?
No, I don't know. That wouldn't be applicable in this situation.
So it's specific, this policy is specific to trans kids itself. So cis kids can, example, change their name, but a trans kid specifically isn't given the same luxury.
Well, specific to if they've expressed a desire to change their gender, which I think is likely a more significant development in their life than just going by a nickname.
So the name is based on the gendering of the name. So if someone's given name is Tim, they wouldn't be allowed to change it to Veronica, but they'd be allowed to change it to Dave.
Yeah, so those are all situations and scenarios that we're going to be working with school divisions so that we can provide clarity to what the policy will look like. I think as your questions have demonstrating, these are very complex issues. And the view of the government is that in these very complex issues, parents should be involved more, not less.
Are you concerned that you're going to be missing out trans kids?
So certainly what the policy will be going forward is that in the event that a child expresses a concern that their parents will not be acceptable of this, what the policy will tell the school divisions is that they need to provide the support to that student to get them to a place where they are comfortable telling their parents. Again, like I said, we have relatively speaking, small community schools. Other people are going to know. And so even if there is a policy that can be developed today to say that the parent or the teacher is not able to tell the parent, that doesn't bind anybody else in the school. The other 25 or 26 kids in the school, they can go home. They can tell their own parents, which likely will result in that parent of that child finding out. And so what I want to do is avoid a situation where a parent finds out indirectly as they're trying to build a relationship and have a good relationship with their teacher, they find out indirectly. As a parent, the first place I would go to would be that teacher, and then to my principal, and then to my trustee, then to my superintendent. And so I think as we're seeing these policies developed, not only here in Saskatchewan, in some school divisions, but across the country, I think in some cases that can put teachers in a very difficult position, and we want to avoid that. So this is not about outing anyone. This is about providing the support for a student that has made that decision. They have that desire to change their gender, to change their name. We want to be able to ensure that if there is any reason why they're uncomfortable with their parents knowing that, that we are providing the support that they need to get them to a place. The default, as I said before, the default position can't be, how do we keep this from the parents? The default position must be, what support does that child need in order to get them to a place where they are comfortable telling their parents? Because they're telling everyone else.
But how do you actually ensure that those safety mechanisms are in place? Because there are some parents out there that no matter what, they're not going to be accepting no matter what.
Again, we're going to work with school divisions to put those policies in place, to put those supports in place. Those are the supports that are going to need to be provided to that student, to that child. Again, when we look at the school system already, there are a number of touch points within the school system where the parents have to be involved. In things, I would argue, that are less critical in terms of a student's development, a kid's development, than something as significant as the desire to change their name, to change their gender, to identify as a different gender. So if we are requiring school divisions to get parental consent to go to a half-day field trip to the Science Center, then I think we need to be treating this issue with the same amount of seriousness.
So just to be clear, if someone has unsupportive, unaccepting parents, even if there's a plan to work through, if the parents say, no, I'm not going to let my child go by their preferred name and pronoun, the teachers are instructed to, at the detriment of the child, use the wrong name and pronouns for the child, as instructed by the parent?
So that will be the policy going forward. Again, what the supports that need to be put in place is to find out why the child feels that way, why they feel like they cannot have the support of their parents. I think, generally speaking, parents want to be supportive of their own kids.
But if they don't have the support of the parents, you're saying the school will not give support either?
Well, the school will give support to that student. Ultimately, that's what needs to take place. We want the school to be a safe and welcoming environment for all of our students, but we don't want to do that at the detriment of causing a separation between the relationship between a parent and their child.
In the
But
development,
isn't support calling them by their preferred name and their preferred pronoun? Like, wouldn't that be the support that child would want in the case that a parent does not want that to be changed on their child?
Again, these are very complex issues. I think every situation is going to be
But
different.
how is the teacher providing support if they can't call the student by their preferred name and pronoun?
Well, they'll have to obviously have a conversation with the student, because the teacher will know that the policy says that they can't do that unless the parent consents.
So you're going to be putting teachers in a really tricky position.
I think,
They're
frankly,
already working really hard, so now it looks like you're adding another layer on top of that to deal with it.
I think they're already in a tricky position. I think some of the policies that we're already seeing in this country and starting in this province already are putting teachers in a tricky position. Because as the policy states, if a child, remember, we're talking about children. We're not talking about small versions of adults. We're talking about children. And if a child, for whatever reason, feels that they don't have the support at home from their parents, policies that are already in development today already put that teacher potentially in a tricky position.
so in the development of this policy, what kind of research did you guys do on the effects of not respecting a child's gender identity?
So it's something that the ministry has, as we have developed policy over the last number of years and are looking at, obviously this is, as I said before, it's a complex field. What we want to ensure is that students can be successful and that parents are more involved in their children's education. So, for instance, in terms of, so there's three different policies that we are making changes to. In the case of sexual health education, 15 out of 27 school divisions already have a version of this policy. The other school divisions have some policies in terms of what is deemed in their administrative procedures, what are deemed to be controversial issues that have various parental involvement. In some cases, the onus is put on the parents. In some cases, the onus is put on the school to provide information in terms of what's being taught, when it's being taught. So what we're saying is that the majority of schools already have a policy like this in place. School divisions have a policy like this in place. So we're just expanding it to all 27 school divisions. The onus has to be on the schools, not the parents.
But if you're gonna expand something to the entire province, did you consult any experts in whether this was the correct way to go?
So we will be, going forward, we'll be discussing this with school divisions, we'll be discussing this with parents. Obviously, there is lots of data and research that goes into making decisions, have gone into making decisions, and will be going into making decisions into the future. But at the end of the day, what we want to ensure is that what parents are saying is that they want to be more involved. They don't want to be less involved.
But wouldn't you want to do like that research and stuff before you make a province-wide policy?
Look, I would say that school divisions are already starting to make decisions on policy. There have been administrative procedures in place in some cases, in some school divisions for over a year now, which frankly most parents didn't even know about. So what we're saying is that we want to ensure that there is consistency across the province when it comes to these policies.
Is there a concern that that's coming, like, if you haven't done the research, you're gonna do that later? Is there any concern that you're gonna find out that this is the wrong way to go with this policy and the consistency across the school divisions has gone the wrong way?
I don't know how involving parents more is wrong.
Did you consult a single trans person before moving forward with this policy?
So the ministry has had discussions with a number of groups and organizations over the last number of years as policies have been developed. So this is the direction that we are moving today, that we want parents to be more involved.
Did you consult a single trans person before on this specific policy before rolling it out?
I don't know who all the ministry would have talked about over the last number of years as policy has been developed. The same would be true. I don't know who school divisions have talked to as they have implemented their own policies.
What about this specific policy? There's any number of policies over the past years. What about this specific policy? Do you talk to any trans people or trans organizations for this specific policy?
Well, I think this is a policy that is a part of a larger set of policies that have been put in place by the ministry. What we will be doing over the next amount of time is we will be refining that policy, ensuring that it is a made in Saskatchewan policy. We're not going to be using outside third-party organizations from out of province. We're going to be working with the school divisions. We'll be working with parents and other individuals that have an interest in this. So that will be our plan going forward.
So at this present time, you cannot confirm any trans people were consulted in making this policy, which targets trans youth?
Well, I don't have a list of all who the ministry has discussed this with.
So New Brunswick has made similar changes, policies there. Their youth advocate has called for them to be reversed over concerns about discrimination of LGBTQ students, specifically saying it could lead to inadvertent discrimination. Their youth advocate is saying that they should reverse those, but you guys are putting some of the same ones in. Is that a concern? What do you think of that?
No, I don't think it's a concern. Certainly, if our youth advocate wishes to look at the policy, she's able to do that within her authority, and we would work with her based on any recommendations that she would put forward. So I don't have a concern. I understand what New Brunswick has put in place. I've had the opportunity to speak with the minister, and I'm certainly, as Minister of Education in Saskatchewan, I'm comfortable with moving forward with these directives.
So it's not a concern that you're implementing a policy that an expert has said could be inadvertently discriminatory?
Well, certainly we don't want to be discriminatory to anybody in this province, but we also want to ensure that parents fundamentally are at the core of their children's education. I think it's widely regarded and known that parents are the first educator for children. Our teachers are great and they do a great job, but parents are the most important people in a children's life.
Are teachers on board with what you're proposing? Have you consulted with them?
Not specifically on this policy change with the STF, but I will say that I have heard directly from a number of teachers as policies have been put in place by school divisions that have a level of discomfort with policies that their employers are putting in place.
How does I guess specifically the names and pronouns policy drive with the rights of children, specifically Article 2 around non-discrimination for what gender a child identifies with.
Yeah, I would, again, say, Lisa, this is really about not, if a child does express a desire to change their name and gender, certainly that doesn't, this policy doesn't say that can't happen. What it does say is that we need to involve the parents in, likely for a child, what is going to be one of the most significant decisions that they make as a child. And so as an education system, we have a responsibility to ensure that in a number of areas that parents consent. A child under the age of 16 can't enroll in school on their own. A child under the age of 16 can't take Tylenol on their own without their parents' consent in a school. They can't go on a field trip without their parents consenting. They can't be the subject of an intervention at a school, an intervention plan, without the parents consenting. And so I think that for issues that are, certainly in my view, less significant as the desire to change one's gender under the age of 16, we ask for consent we demand consent from parents for any number of things. This is an area that obviously we want to provide support to that child that is going through what, in the life of a child, a 13-year-old, which will at that time be probably the most significant thing that they have considered. And we just feel like parents need to be and want to be involved in those types of decisions.
Why allow kids or parents to opt out of certain sex ed curriculum? Are things like consent or where is the line drawn on that?
Yeah. So again, Adam, 15 out of 27 school divisions already have a policy that do provide for parents to be informed to varying degrees of when sex ed, we'll just call it sex ed, sexual health education, when sex ed is going to be taught, what's going to be taught, what the curriculum is, what resources are going to be used. So the majority of school divisions already have this policy in place. A number of school divisions essentially put the onus on the parents to kind of find out, if they have a problem with it. My view is that, I think that, again, this is an issue that we've heard from parents. They want to know. They want to be involved in their education of their children. The majority of school divisions already do this, and so let's just make it consistent across the piece.
Do you think that allowing parents to let their children opt out of sex ed, could that negatively impact them, like not learning certain things?
And that's one thing that we'll be working with the school divisions, because some school divisions that do allow an opt-out essentially say that there'll be alternative material that will be used by the student, or there will be attempts for the student to essentially obtain the curricular outcomes, maybe not in the classroom setting. And so we'll be working with school divisions to see whether or not there will be an accommodation to say, you still have to, one thing that we'd be looking at is to say you still have to ensure that the students achieve the curricular outcome, but maybe it will be done out of classroom, maybe it will be alternative resources in the event that a parent objects to a resource that's being used. Frankly, maybe I think should be parents being involved in that part of the education as well, talking to your own kids about sensitive subjects like sex ed.
Saskatchewan, I believe, has one of the highest teen pregnancy rates in the country. Do you think that allowing as a larger policy parents to take their kids out of sex ed is a good idea given that statistic? Yeah,
I think that's a complex subject as well. I don't think there's any one reason why. I don't think we're the highest. I think Saskatchewan, Manitoba, a few other provinces kind of go back and forth, and I haven't seen the numbers. What they are recently, I think it's a larger issue than whether or not a kid has taken sex ed class or not. Whether or not their parents have opted out, I think it's a bigger discussion than that. And frankly, I think that's one that parents need to, frankly, step up and be more involved in.
On the pronouns and name changes, who's complaining about that?
Well, certainly parents have been, I've heard loud and clear from parents that are concerned, partly because they really haven't been made aware that school divisions are beginning to change their administrative procedures and have been pretty quiet about it, frankly. and are kind of finding out from, frankly, teachers that are sharing this with them, that this is now the new policy of our school division. As I said before, teachers have reached out to me to say that they are uncomfortable with the position that this potentially puts them in. So it's just been a growing course of parents, teachers that have expressed concern.
Has the government received any official complaints at all from parents?
Oh, well, I receive a lot of correspondence from parents that I would think are pretty official.
Are you,
And I'm just wondering, like, if a student who is trans, who wants to maybe change, pronoun changes, how does that affect a parent, another student that doesn't have a trans child?
Sorry, can you say that again,
You say
Jeremy?
you have complaints from parents, but you never said if those were actual parents of trans kids or just transphobic parents of cis kids, yes?
Yeah, so I'm just curious, how does another family's trans kid affect them?
No, I don't think, no, I wouldn't characterize it as that another parent's trans kid affects them. I think it's, I think the concern and the complaints have been, why are there policies in place that essentially take me out of the picture when it comes to something as critical and as significant in my child's life?
So hypothetically, if you have a 14 or 15-year-old girl named Leah, she has abusive parents at home that refuse to recognize her gender identity, but at school, everyone uses she, her pronouns. She is the same as all her peers. So now, according to this, the direction is for the teachers to misgender and dead name Leah.
No, the direction is to wrap around that student, provide the support that that student needs. The scenario that, and obviously getting into hypotheticals is difficult, but the scenario that you're describing, there likely are other issues going on in that household.
The parent would not give consent, so the teacher is instructed to not use her name and pronouns?
Right, but there are likely other situations going on in that household, and there are already procedures in place in the event that a student is essentially at risk in their own household. And that's already covered under the law, and it's already covered by school divisions.
So in this case, would the teacher be permitted to use the student's correct name and pronouns as used by the student?
At that point, they wouldn't be, but again, there would have to be supports that would be provided to that student to find out what the issue is. Is it that the student, and again, we're getting into hypotheticals, and I think that that's a difficult thing to do, but I think the issue is, we have to find out what the concern is that the student has.
Are you worried about being challenged by the Human Rights Commission or a constitutional challenge brought forward?
I'm not worried. It may happen, but I'm not worried.
Did you consult any students, so we know that, you can't confirm if trans groups were, consulted about this? Parents obviously were, the SDF wasn't. So what about students themselves? The ones affected by this?
Again, I don't have a list of all that the ministry would have consulted with. So, I can't say, I can't say for sure. But again, I think, I'm sensitive to the fact that this is a complex issue, and there are no easy answers in this. I think that in some of the policies that have been put forward, I think present a lot of challenges for parents. They present challenges for some teachers. Ultimately, I think what I'm trying to keep in mind is that we are talking about children. We're not talking about small version of adults. We're talking about children who don't have the life experience that you or I have yet, whose brains are still being formed, who are struggling with all sorts of things like puberty, impulse control. And so, I want to ensure that, I'm respectful and mindful of the sensitivities of this. But I also think that, a couple of things have been really clear. By and large, what parents are telling me is that they want schools to be, to get back to the basics. They also want to be informed about the most important decisions that their children are making and that's not always the case. And the adults need to be the adults.
Do you support trans rights?
I do. I think that what I try to do is I try to treat everyone, and I am imperfect as I am in this, with respect, with kindness, to carry myself with humility. I don't have all the answers. And so, absolutely, I try to respect all people. But I also know, as Minister of Education, I'm responsible, ultimately, for nearly 200,000 children in the education system.
Why does your policy apply differently to cis kids and trans kids? Like a cis kid could change what name they go by and their preferred name, but the same doesn't apply to trans kids.
Again, I think the name part of the policy is really associated with the gender change, the desire to change gender.
So trans kids, as you just said, the policy applies differently to trans kids and cis kids, and what name they want to go by. A cis kid can go by a different name or anything, and what they want to be called the same doesn't apply to trans kids, is what you're saying.
No, I see a distinction between a child who wishes to express a different gender identity and an associated name change with that, and a child that wants to go by a nickname. I think most people would see that there's a clear distinction in that. I had a nickname growing up.
Did you require parental permission?
No, but my parents didn't have to feel like my nickname change was associated with me expressing a desire to change my gender. So I think there is a distinction.
Before the next question, I just want to specify the hypothetical earlier about Leah. She was a real trans teenager that killed herself after unsupported parents.
And that's a tragedy. I think for any child who no longer, for whatever reason, who no longer can see a picture of the future that includes them in it, is a tragedy. And we need to provide supports to all children to ensure that they actually do see a future that includes them in it, regardless of the situation.
Minister, in the research done by yourself and your ministry, have you come across any numbers? You spoke of the number of students that you're in charge of roughly 200,000. Do we know how many students by number this affects in the province, or what percentage of students have in the last year or two requested a name change due to a gender change?
No, I don't. I think in part because, we would have to look, Gareth, we'd have to look at what information that the school divisions could provide on that. Again, some school divisions did not have a fully formed policy when it came to, so there was really no way to formally make a request. So I don't know what the number would be.
When it comes to the third-party sex education,
Yeah.
I'm assuming that came out of the Planned Parenthood situation a few months ago?
Partly. I think that, certainly the direction that teachers are to provide the curriculum, to implement the curriculum and teach the course. The ministry has met with Planned Parenthood twice. Planned Parenthood themselves have expressed an interest in perhaps moving away from classroom delivery of material. And so I think that that's appropriate. So this is really, we have teachers. Teachers are trained to develop or to deliver the curriculum. As an employer, school division needs to provide support to their teachers in the event that a teacher isn't comfortable delivering the curriculum. Then the school division needs to provide the support to get them to a place where that they are comfortable in delivering the curriculum to the students. But that's why we have teachers to deliver it. The other thing too I think is important in this is that parents have a relationship with their teachers. They don't have a relationship with a third-party organization. And so if there are concerns that are raised as a part of what is discussed in class, they have that ability to go and talk to the teacher, either before or after. there really isn't that ability to have a discussion with a third-party organization because a parent doesn't have that relationship. They have it with the teacher. Those discussions, because what we're going to do is work with school divisions to continue to refine and develop this Made in Saskatchewan policies going forward.
Now, the ARC Foundation, this SOGI 123,
Yep.
from what I've read, that's specifically regarding making schools inclusive for all sexual orientations. Why would you pick that one out as an example?
Well, that is an organization that a number of school divisions, not just here, but across Canada, have been working with. And I just think that the advice and the recommendations that that particular organization is providing to school divisions, which would frankly be inconsistent with what I'm announcing today. So rather than continuing to have school divisions go forward with an organization that is putting forward policies that are inconsistent with the government, we're going to pause that work while we work with school divisions to make Saskatchewan policy without a BC-based organization.
What would you say to those who are going to hear these announcements today and think that the provincial government is wading into the culture wars?
No, what I'm wading into is having parents more involved in their kids' lives, not less.
Minister, I have a COVID question here, if I might, sir.
Sure.
Dr. Nazim Mujarian says ventilation will be mightily important this fall as vaccination rates have waned. He wants to see schools increase ventilation and filtration as new subvariants crop up. Is the province and your ministry monitoring this? Any initiatives to improve ventilation?
Well, I think we took a number of steps to improve ventilation and air quality in schools at the initial phase of COVID. Late in, I believe it was 2020, we had provided with the federal government over $150 million. A lot of that money went into increasing ventilation, largely, as you can imagine, for older schools that would not have the up-to-date HVAC systems like today's schools have. So it's not a concern that I've heard from school divisions. I think that a lot of work went into improving our schools, improving the ventilation in schools, and so we'll continue to monitor that, but it's not something that has been raised with me that school divisions have a concern going into the fall.
And we'll go to the last couple questions.
Going back to
Sure.
how this policy applies to trans kids but not cis kids, for the parent to have to report it for the teacher to have to report it to the parent, is it just that the teacher might suspect the kid is trans or suspect that the name is too, if they're female identified too masculine or male identified too feminine? What's the sort of line there that the teacher decides, okay, I think this kid is trans, I'm going to report this name change to the parents?
Well, I think that would be, again, areas that we have to work out with the school divisions in terms of what those actual procedures will be. I think that will obviously depend upon the teacher themselves. The scenario that you've provided, or the hypothetical, my read of that would be that would be the teacher making assumptions, which I don't know why a teacher would voluntarily start changing the gender of a student based on an assumption.
Not pronouns, but a name change request.
Well, again, that would, yeah, and there would have to be obviously a discussion between the teacher and the student in a case like that.
So it's a teacher, a male identified student named Steve can go by Veronica as long as they don't tell the teacher they're trans, or the teacher doesn't.
Well, why would the teacher call the student Veronica?
Because the student requests, you said this.
So then the student has made a request.
So the parent would have to be notified, or for the teacher to do it. But so if Steve wanted to go by Tom, that request would also have to be made? Or is it basis on the name is more feminine or more masculine?
No, it doesn't. Again, I try not to get into hypotheticals, but I think, if I was the teacher, the first question would be, well, why do you want me to call you Tom, Steve?
I want this, and
Again,
because they just want to go by that nickname, will the teacher apply?
Yeah, those are things that we have to work through with the school divisions.
But
Yeah.
the teacher is taking on teaching sex ed, and they already have classes that they were teaching before? Do you feel like this is gonna put more on their plate or more stress for teachers now that they have to take that on as well?
No, this is already something that is a part of the role of a teacher. So a teacher that has been assigned typically it's the health class that sexual health education is provided. So it would be the teacher that would be assigned that at the beginning of the year. They know that they're teaching that class. They would prepare their material the same as they would. What this change is basically saying is that they won't be able to bring in a third party to essentially help facilitate or teach the class. In the event that there are aspects of the class that they have trouble teaching, or for whatever reason, for whatever reason it might be, ultimately they have to talk to their employer about, here's some issues that I have with teaching the class, that in the past they might have had a third party come in and teach that part of the class. What we're really saying is that we hire teachers to teach. Parents have a relationship with the teacher, not with a third party organization, and especially in classes that can be particularly sensitive to some people, it's best to be able to keep that relationship between the parent and the teacher.
When it comes to the third party people coming in for sex ed, I know when the Planned Parenthood thing came up, you said that the ministry was going to be looking at all types of curriculums and what people are bringing in to see if it's appropriate. What did you find specifically that made you want to go in this direction?
Frankly, there aren't a lot of third-party, as far as we could tell, third-party organizations. Planned Parenthood seemed to be more of a Regina area organization that had been used, but it didn't seem to be widespread around the province. We did put the stipulation in that this wouldn't stop the ability for a school division, for example, to bring in a public health nurse from the SHA. So public health nurse would still be able to come in as a part of a class. So there wasn't, in particular to sexual health education, there weren't a lot of third parties that were engaged by school divisions.
Just as the Minister of Education, I'm curious how this ranks on your list of priorities when it comes to compared to, reading levels, student learning outcomes, graduation rates, that sort of thing.
I think it's connected. I think from what I have been able to see, and certainly we are running a pilot, have been running it began as a pilot project through the Saskatchewan School Board Association around the issue of parental engagement, and actually having teacher home visits. So where teachers were actually going into the home, having to building a relationship with the parents to find out what your expectations are for your own kids, and how can we help, how can I help as a teacher. And so I think from what I've seen, the more that we can engage parents, include parents, involve parents in their education, from what I can see, that has a positive correlation in things like reading levels, in graduation rates, in not only academic success, but also social and emotional success as well. So I think that this is part and parcel with the goals that we've set as a ministry and as an education sector.
Perfect, thanks everybody. Thanks everyone.